What is going on, YouTube? Of course, I had to do the video on the PTR balance patch. Well, I guess more so potential balance patch. So for those of you who may not be familiar, Blizzard did announce or I don't know if Blizzard, ESL, somebody over here announced that there will be a potential balance patch, or this may be the potential next balance patch. And they're going to be testing it on a PTR, which is the public test realm. So you can go ahead and actually download that on Battle.net. I'll actually show you how to do that real quick before we begin. But I'm going to be looking at the changes and giving you guys my point of view as Terran. So yeah, you can click here, and this is where you can download the public test realm. So without further ado, boys, let's get started. So we got Zerg up here first. Real quick, I do want to mention that these changes will definitely not be final. There will definitely be some tweaks made as people play the PTR. I also want to say that this balance update was definitely drafted or at least discussed amongst pros. So a lot of the changes that you see are reflected in pros opinion, reflecting pros opinions and stuff like that. Um, And for the release of the patch, I would imagine that it won't be for a while now. I imagine it won't be till February, the earliest. Um, Most likely after the World Championship. So, if you're wondering, how much time we have to practice it, or um, when they're expecting these changes to come out officially, most likely going to be around that time. But yeah, let's just get started here. So we have Zerg first, of course. They're pretty good. I've seen some of the changes. I'm very familiar with the changes. Um, and I do think Zerg might be winning a little bit here, but we'll talk about more about that later. Creep tumor. So cooldown increase from 11 to 13 seconds, and the sight range reduced from 11 to 10. So I really think the sight range is a big thing. Creep obviously is very strong, and also like this is a bit of a meme, but honestly, it's a bit true that before there was a thing where like Zerg, like a specific Zerg player had like really good creep spread, right? Like off the top of my head, like something that Scarlet was really known for was her creep spread, right? So like that was a big thing, especially in like I don't know 2016, 2015. That was the thing to say. Nowadays, I feel like because it's just been so streamlined and there is a process, and pro Zerg players talk about this process on their YouTube channels or streams and stuff like that, that they've pretty much figured out the best way, the most optimal way to spread creep. And I do think that now it's not really the case of like, wow, Scarlet has really good creep. That's still true, but actually there's a lot of people who now have really good creep. And I'm seeing, as somebody who coaches regularly in Diamond Masters, like everyone's got good creep spread. So this is nice to see. I do think that creep was definitely a point of frustration for a lot of people. So this is really great to see, and I don't think it impacts the Zerg players too much. So this is a very nice and simple change in my opinion. Okay, hatchery, layer, and hive creep spread interval decreased from 0.3 to 0.25. Sight range increased from 10, 11, 12 to 12. Okay, so it seems like when the hatchery finishes, it gives you more range instead of slowly increasing vision range, right? With the creep spread. Creep spread interval decrease. Okay. Viper added 0.71 second cast finish time to abduct. Cannot move or use other abilities during this time. I think this was actually meant to address some stuff with like Vipers abducting each other. Can't remember exactly. But this doesn't seem like it's too big of a deal. Might help with mech a bit, but um I think that's too bad there. Ultralisk. Reduce size by 12.5%. So this is a really big one. Um if you actually look, and who could I know exactly where we can go. If I actually look real quick, TLO posted a picture of the Ultralisk. They're incredibly small. Like incredibly small, which means that it's a little bit harder to choke them up between buildings, right? If you have like the perfect building side by side like this to have the ultras funnel through there, that's great. But this makes it a little bit more complicated. So for what I understand here, basically the Ultralisk has a size reduction but the range of their slop is either higher or the same. Um, to reflect the size reduction. So from what I understand, they have the same size chop, but they are just their unit size is smaller. So that's pretty good. That's pretty good, man. That might make the ultras a bit better. Obviously, ultras were really not that great before, especially massing them just because of how small or how big they are, and like they kind of get shit on by marauders, honestly. So as I do think this helps the ultralisk a bit, I don't think it's the end of the world, and I don't think it's anything people should be worried about. It just means that you have to respect ultralisk a little bit more. But like I mentioned, mass marauders destroys ultralisk easily, so this doesn't really change that in my opinion. And maybe we'll just have to put a little bit more focus on like where you put your buildings and stuff like that. Hydralisk. Okay, muscular augments move speed bonus increased from 0.79 to 1.05. So the Hydra's upgrade is going to give you a bit more speed. Damage point reduced from 0.15 to zero point 0.1. Okay, so the Hydra speed, I don't think that's terrible. I do think Hydras off creep are just slow as shit, even with the speed upgrade. So I don't think that this is terrible. I do think that they're on creep now. They're going to be like Ferraris, maybe, but um, I think it's okay. Like off creep Hydralisk are just like it's just so easy to pick them off, and um, what? Not even snipes, like just Marauders. Just seeing one Marauder bios, just they really just die. So I think that's not too bad. I think that's pretty good for Zerg. Um, and yeah. All right, Broodlord. So Broodlord move speed increased from 1.97 to 2.3. All right, so this is a big thing because they're trying to basically in the change below says broodling duration reduced from 5.71 to 3.57. So the move speed is increased, but they're trying to balance that out with the idea that the broodling duration is reduced. So I think this has to do with the micro ability of the broodlords. So being able to run away a bit easier from Thors, especially. Um, and nobody's really using Vikings to kill broodlords, right? It's usually if you're fighting broodlords, you're trying to kill them with Thors, or you're fighting in a fight with Thors. So, and I think this allows Zerg to have a bit more micro ability with the broodlords. But of course that comes with the brooding being reduced. So personally, I actually don't mind this change. I actually like it. Um, I think there would be times where I'd be playing. I felt the broodling just didn't. The broodlings lasted forever, and people started adding the idea of like blue flame hellbat with medevac support for the Thors and those super late game armies. And I do think that will help with this a lot. So you know what? I think this is okay. Those late game Thor armies are pretty good. And as a Zerg player, you had to build like 25 broodlords to be able to like deal. There's like a specific number of broodlords, and it was like really really high to deal with that like mass Thor ghost hellbout army. And maybe this will just help with that a bit. So Ravager build time increased from 8.6 to 12.9 seconds. This is great. This is actually a big thing for dealing with Ravager Olins, in my opinion. You get a couple extra seconds, which could mean like maybe you're taking. Your Banshee comes out within this time frame or something like that. So this is actually pretty good. I think it eases some of the necessity to be able to scout the Ravager timings as soon as possible. I obviously the faster you scout it, the better it is for you. But like, I think if you miss some things, you still have some play involved. Or maybe if you didn't play Banshees and you're trying to pop a bunker as fast as you can, this might help with that to defend that. So I don't know how this affects ZVP. Like I couldn't tell you that. So like again, like I'm looking at these changes from a Terran POV, but yeah, I think that if it doesn't affect ZVP too much, then I think that this change it's not bad. I think it's good. It's actually not something I would have thought of myself, to be honest. But I think there was some point of frustration where like as soon as I saw the Ravagers morphing, I was just like fuck. So Protoss. All right, shield battery. Battery overcharge recharge rate reduced from 200 to 150. Okay, so this has to do with like when you're fighting under the battery, it's the rate at which the super battery heals the unit. So, this is I actually heard that apparently you can actually kill stuff in the battery now under the battery, which is fantastic. So I'm sure you guys have seen so many memes of like people trying to kill like a Colossus off the super battery and it just couldn't do it, even though it was like low HP. So um, that was just stupid. Like that was just straight up stupid, and I'm happy that it's being changed because if it was like if it's a full HP unit, I think it's fine, right? But like if it's literally a Colossus with like red HP and the battery's out DPSing like 6 Marauders, like that's fucked. So with 6 Marauders, you could kill it eventually, but it just takes so much time, and like those couple of seconds matter a lot, right? Those couple of seconds, 2-3 seconds, could be an additional 7 Zealot Warpin, for example, or another Colossus coming out or Disruptor coming out. So it's like it actually is pretty insane if you keep it alive long enough under the battery to get an additional Warpin, right? Then it gets saved, even though it was the only unit under the battery, right? With like low HP. So next change here, Observer move speed increased from 2.63 to 2.82. That's pretty crazy. I guess they were a little bit slow. I do, as somebody who operates as Protoss sometimes, I would say like following an army, sometimes the army would outpace it if you didn't have Observer speed. And it's a bit impractical to get Observer speed. You gotta get thermal lance. You gotta allocate so much of your gas to early units that are either required for defense or or they require certain upgrades like Storm or thermal lance, like I said. So this is actually, I think this change here makes sense. The model size increase is really nice as well because it just makes them a bit easier to see and kill. So I like both of these changes. I think this change is good for Protoss, and I think it's fine. I think it might alleviate some of the necessity perhaps to play Stargate if you feel like because Revelation sometimes may just be better than the Observers, right? But the problem is like you have to play Stargate to have super good scouting, and the Observer is like you do have the range ability, right? So you can start like where they transform and then they start detecting from a farther range. So but if an army is moving out into the middle of the map, you kind of want to be able to follow it, and it did seem like armies would oftentimes outpace the Observers. Okay, Archon can now fit between single gap walls. So so this is a PVZ change for the most part, but this is great. This is actually great. Because I would imagine it's just so annoying. It's just more stress for Protoss players to get literally exactly like the most perfect wall off to make sure that you can fit Archon through there. And if you fuck up your wall, maybe it's okay now, and also just less frustrating. So I feel like I see this more as a quality of life change. Move speed increased from 2.63 to 2.82. I hate to say it, but this is kind of necessary. At the high level, a lot of people put the Templar in the Warp Prism. Obviously, that requires additional control. So at the lower levels, this is not something that you can do to. It's not as easy to do, right? And they were pretty slow. Like they were slow as shit, or they are slow as shit. So like, if you saw them in a clump, EMPing them with a ghost was definitely very, 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 very feasible. So I actually don't mind this change too much at all. I think it makes sense. I think it's fine. I don't think it'll change. I don't think it'll change too much. It might be a little bit annoying for microing against the storms if you're being attacked already, or maybe you don't see this High Templar in time. But I think if you see the High Templar in time and you have Ghost out, this doesn't really change too much of that interaction. I still think Ghosts are fast enough and mobile enough that you can hit them with an EMP, even if they're moving just a little bit faster. Okay, Disruptor. Purifier Orb radius reduced from 1.5 to 1.35. I think this is the best Disruptor change they could have ever done. Or have done. If you guys remember a few balance patches, I can't remember when, but basically like they would always switch between the Disruptor like hitting on impact, or like that pause time where they throw it into you and then like we gotta wait a couple seconds and then it pops, right? I think even at some point they had tested like, man, I can't remember. There was another change. Oh man, I can't remember. It was another like creative kind of change, but I feel like I always felt that just reducing the size of the fucking orb was what they needed to do to change it or to fix it. So I think this is great. I really enjoy this, and it's gonna make people. It's gonna make people play the game more or again because like, the thing about RTS, thing about Starcraft in general is like I personally think that any unit that like can immediately change the state of the game through one impact is fucking stupid. Like it goes the same. It's the same thing for nukes, right? Like obviously nukes are not always hitting, but nukes have the potential to are just game ending. Disruptors can be game ending. Storm can be game ending. There's another Terran one that's game. Widow Mine is gonna be game ending, right? Like you detonate one Widow Mine into like 25 Banes and just pop, and the game can be over. Like those kinds of units are just are. I don't like that kind of stuff. So I don't think it's good for game design. Um, at least they're not balanced properly. So I think this helps a lot. I also think there might be I think there's a Widow Mine change, or it could be wrong. I think there was going. I think they were thinking about doing the one. But I think this is great. So happy to see this. Carrier. This is another big one. This is another point of like frustration for a lot of players, right? If we talk about Protoss from a design standpoint, it's definitely weaker at the pro levels. But especially against like high level Terrans and high level Zergs and stuff like that, the skill ceiling is not the height of the skill ceiling is not as reachable. I guess if that makes sense. Like, um, I feel like Terran, if you get really good, you can like it's really good, and the same thing for Zerg, but Protoss not the same. But I do think it's a bit easier to play some of the units in the lower levels. And for example, the carrier is always a point of frustration for a lot of people, especially people that I coach. Whether you're a Terran or a Zerg player, from both racial standpoints, like Terran and Zergs, like they both I feel like both races players are very frustrated with the carrier design. So interceptor shields reduced from 40 to 30. Interceptor attack target priority reduced from 20 to 19, and interceptor flying radius around target increased. So pretty much for this third one, the interceptors fly in a bigger circle, and for the second one here, interceptor attack target priority reduced from 20 to 19. So I think if you're close enough to the carrier, your unit will start hitting the carriers, and if your unit is otherwise, you would hit the interceptor. So that is a pretty big one. I see this like as there might be a bit more micro required, but I think this helps kill them way easier, right? You can actually EMP interceptors for those that don't know that. So EMPing these definitely drains them out, and also maybe even need less EMPs, right? And then also here makes them a bit easier to kill. So this is great. Sentry build time reduced from 26.4 to 22.9. I actually think that this is a cool change because Sentry openers are honestly just impossible sometimes, and maybe this will allow people before Warp Gate finishes to be able to build sentries, right, as an earlier opener and increase the scouting abilities for Protoss. Because I hate to say it, but it's true. Terran has the ability to scout very early on with a Reaper. Okay, and I hate Protoss as much as the next guy, but having to wait until you have an Oracle, right? You do have an Adept, but the thing with the Adept is you can't really get into the main, right? Unless there's a wall. With the Reaper, you can actually still get into the main, even if there is a wall, right? If you jump the units, if you jump into like the grenade trick, right? Protosses aren't really walling off their main ramp also. So like I think this is a cool change. And I don't think it changes TVP too much. I guess it could with openers, but the thing is, like, if you proxy buildings and you fly a hallucinated Phoenix into Terran's main, you don't see anything. You still have to actually guess what it is, right? So I'm not too sure about this one, but I think it's fine. The Forge upgrades, I don't know why they did this. I'm gonna be honest. This seems kind of, I don't know. At least from a Terran, I don't know if this is like a Protoss versus Zerg change, but the upgrade research time being reduced, I don't know. With the fact that they also have Chrono, it always felt that the upgrades are pretty fast, right? You could have upgrade advantage and instantly be even or behind on upgrades if Protoss placed the focus on or an emphasis on chronoing out Forge upgrades. So to me, this is actually pretty crazy. Like, I'm gonna talk to some Protoss players and see what the reasoning is for this, if any at all. But also, my camera is just hello. But yeah, this is actually a pretty mental change. I'm not too sure why what this is, but you know, gateway armies might be a bit stronger now, especially after we talk about some changes with the Ghost. And yeah, I don't know. I think having 1/1 when you do, I think as a Terran, if you do your +1 push and Protoss having 1/1 is a bit more possible, right? Like it's still expensive, especially like you can't really afford double Forge upgrades if you're also building Colossus and stuff like that off 3 bases, so like 5 minutes, 6 minutes into the game. And there might not be an incentive for people to go double forwards while still playing Colossus. Like, I think that would be fucking crazy. But I think like if you're playing the gateway style, it's just a bit stronger now. So I'll have to see how this one works. Terran Ghost. Enhanced shockwaves upgrade removed. Okay, so that's fine because it says here the base EMP radius increased from 1.5 to 1.75. So honestly, they maybe will increase this size. I don't know. I'll be honest, enhanced shockwave is just fucking broken. It was completely broken. Like the fact that you could literally never miss with it was insane. I understand that at the lower levels, controlling ghosts may not be as easy. And I think this is also one of those things that showcases like maybe being balance being done amongst pros and at maybe perhaps with the pro scene in mind more so than the casual scene. But the shockwaves, I think even in Diamond or Masters, like it was just so good for Terran. It was so good for Terran. And you just could not miss, So 3 EMPs could hit an entire army center mass. So I honestly agree that the upgrade was really good and that it should probably either have been tweaked or removed. In this case, they removed it in favor of boosting the base EMP radius. So I actually haven't seen it. I'm going to be doing a lot of PTR content after this video. So if you guys want to see how these changes work and us talking about the changes more, then feel free. But feel free to check it out. But yeah, this I like that they gave us this at least, and as long as the radius is not too big, maybe not too small, I think that's great because I do think that this 1.5 base radius is pretty low. So, steady targeting is canceled if the target moves more than 13.5 range away from the ghost while casting. Okay, so this is a really big one because they didn't actually change anything with the lurker, right? Yeah. Okay, they didn't change anything with the lurker, and this is a big deal because lurkers. Sorry, let me rephrase. Ghosts are really good against lurkers. Like I'll be 100% honest. The snipe is incredibly good. Like Zerg players had the ability to kind of like outmaneuver you because of how fast the lurkers are and their ability to burrow so fast as well. So like the fact that they could burrow so quickly was always an issue, or I feel like at least for me, I do think that it's an issue because they're basically like mobile siege tanks. And Terran, when the lurkers come out, a lot of Terrans are forced to, unless you're Clem, to literally forced to like camp, right? Hunker down, defend all your bases, and then try to counter the mobility of the lurker with the mobility of the ghost, right? So you could have tanks and liberators defending bases, and you can mirror the lurkers with your ghost on this side, and then that's how the two like interacted and blended together. So I think changing the ghost but not changing the lurker, I would have wished they would have at least changed the burrow speed, maybe just make it a little bit slower. But I do think that the snipe change makes sense in the sense that if a Zerg did overextend, you would think that like, yeah, if a Zerg player overextends and you land all your snipes, they lose all their army. But the issue is like snipe didn't really have, at least in that specific scenario of like, I'm trying to explain this. Okay, this is how the armies interact, right? You have Ling. Let's say you have Ling, Bane, Lurker, okay, and you attack into Ghost, Siege Tank, Thor. The issue with this is this is my tank line here, right? Liberator, and then on these tanks here, right? Okay, and then a Zerg player runs in with Lurkers and Ling Bane. What ends up happening is while this may die, right? So maybe let's say the siege tanks are definitely dead. Maybe the liberators stay alive, and then you have Ghost here, and then you have Ghost here, right? Just everywhere. What ends up happening is as they try to unburrow, you cast all your snipes right at the lurkers, and there's no counterplay for the lurkers. The lurkers will run away, right? But if you drop a scan here, they'll still die, right? Because you already hit the snipe. So as long as you didn't lose vision of the lurker, it was gonna die, right? Which is a bit busted. However, what I was gonna say was that while you could say that maybe there's no counterplay for Zerg, I think the counterplay is more so that you want the Ling Bane to grab onto the lurker to the ghost to prevent them from sniping, right? Because if the unit is being hit, they can't snipe. But what actually ends up happening is, assuming you can defend and camp properly, that the Zerg player will break this first wall, but they'll run out of Ling Bane, which means it's only lurkers. And then if they need to run away, there's no counterplay anymore, right? They just die. Like, they legit lose everything if you snipe, especially with rapid fire, right? Because rapid fire snipe is a rapid fire ability, so that's another thing as well. Um, and I do think that it would have been nice for them to at least decrease the burrow or increase the burrow, no, decrease the burrow speed, and not make them as fast. But I do think that I do think that it's fair. It's fair, but I do think that it makes it more complicated for people who can micro. Basically, like, if you're a Terran and you save all your ghosts, or yeah, if you're a Terran, you're kind of relying on those ghosts killing the lurkers, because oftentimes the Ling Bane kills so much of your stuff because it's harder to micro against the Ling Bane. And then yeah, it's tough. I'm trying my best to like explain the decision for doing it, but every time I try to, it kind of makes it sound like shit. Like, it's like, oh well, then why don't they? Why, like, that's fucked up for them to like cancel out the ghosts basically, but like still have lurkers be fast, super fast. Um, but yeah, I think it's gonna be okay. I think it's gonna require more micro on the ghost, and I think that might turn off some people from using ghosts. At least against lurkers. I still think that you can still use ghosts against lurkers, but yeah, I think just the control is going to be a bit more difficult, which is already kind of a point of conversation for some people, right? Like, why would when I coach people, it's always like, oh, well, I don't really like using ghosts because they're just really hard to use. Right? They're really good if you can get it down, but otherwise they're very clunky, and it messes up your control groups, and they're very fragile. They die. And micro ability is not there's not enough micro ability as well. So, um, yeah, the idea people are saying that if a lurker unburrows, right, and you already hit the snipe, that it shouldn't be able to outrange the snipe. Um, but we'll have to see how that interacts. Again, we'll have to see how that interacts. I don't want to say any definitives because I haven't actually played the PTR, and we also haven't played. This literally was announced yesterday, so there's not enough information out there to really say like, yeah, this is like completely busted. This is not good. So we'll just keep an eye out on that. But to move along here before I make this video just too long, let's keep moving. Hyperflight rotors upgrade time reduced from 121 seconds to 100 seconds. That's great. I think there is some potential now for you to open cloak or speed banshees before cloak, and maybe by the time you get there, your cloak banshee, zergs have overseers and spores, so maybe being able to outrun the queens and have additional speed will help you micro and hit the drones mining the gas or the drones on the edge a little bit faster. So this it just opens up more potential, right? And that doesn't hurt at all. I think that there is no reason, like, if this upgrade change doesn't end up working out, I don't think it costs anything. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't really mess up anything else. So I think this is cool to just try out. Magfield accelerated damage changed from plus 20 versus armored to plus 10 versus all. So this seems like you get the Magfield upgrade, you lock on, but it doesn't matter which unit you lock on to. All units take extra damage. This is what I'm getting from this. So this might make playing mech a bit better, right? Against Protoss, against Zerg, even Terran. So mech is kind of shit right now. In all the matchups, I know again for some people like mech is like a big thing to deal with in TVZ. I mean, sorry, mech is a big thing to deal with, like TVT or TVZ. People just camp really hard and stuff like that. But at the pro level, keeping the pro level in mind, mech sucks at the pro level, and so like dealing with this might help with that. So again, they're kind of balancing this around. Some of this stuff is being balanced around the with the pro scene in mind more so than the casual scene. So I guess they're telling you guys to get good, man. They're telling you guys to get good. I'm sorry about that. Since tower range reduced from 30 to 27. Yeah, that's okay. It's fucking huge, honestly. Like, they're so good for 100, 100. It's honestly that's fine. Like, you guys can't tell me that you put two sensor towers, you cover half the map if you put them in a good spot. So this is fine. I agree with this. Raven rework. Okay, this is like the last big one, and we'll quickly move to these. This is the last big one. So Raven cost reduced from 200 to 150. The build time reduced from 43 to 30 seconds. Okay, so they're making it cheaper and faster to build. Starting energy increased from 50 to 75. Okay. Interference matrix duration reduced from 11 to 8. Anti-armor missile reduction reduced from 3 to 2. The Corvid reactor upgrade removed, and the auto turret energy cost increased from 50 to 75. Okay. So basically, they nerfed some of the abilities of the Raven in favor, but they're trying to offset it by making it cheaper, faster to build, and it starts with more energy so that it still has an auto turret when you build it. So I do think that this. So like people might get the idea that okay, it's cheaper and has less gas, so and it starts with more energy, so I can build 2 or 3 faster. But the thing is, you start with 75 energy, but it also takes you like you have to wait until you get 75 energy again to harass, for example. So if you open Raven and you want to harass a Berserk player, let's say, right? Let's say, oh yeah, Ravens are cheaper and they're faster to build, so let me just fly my Raven around everywhere and auto turret spam. It's not really gonna work out that way because once you drop that first turret, you gotta wait a fat minute for another turret, right? Um, and there's extra 25 seconds, or sorry, 25 energy. That's a lot. That's a pretty big amount of time. So, um, you know, I do think that it will help a bit with TVT, especially in the late game with the Raven spam. Maybe you don't need to do mass Viking Raven anymore as a late game army with bio. I still think that TVT will still look that way, because despite these changes, you can't understate the utility of the Raven, right? Like the interference matrix, yeah, reduction to 8 seconds, that's true, but in late game army, that's a big amount of time, right? At least again, I'm saying this in TVT with TVT in mind. In TVP early game, I've heard that this change is definitely felt. Um, and I do think that if you weren't able to kill the Raven, then I do think the Raven had too much utility and was really good. Maybe they'll change this to be a little bit, maybe instead of 11 to 8, maybe like 11 to 9 or something like that. Um, but this is going to affect early game a lot for Terran players, and I do think that lower level Terrans struggle a lot with like they rely a lot on the Raven being the unit that kind of saves them in the early game, and now they kind of won't be able to with this change. And you're not really going to build. You could build 2, but then the thing with building 2 is you still need to actually control those as well. And like any extra time you allocate on your starport to building Ravens instead of medevacs delays your medevacs, which means that your push may be delayed anyway. So it may not even be worth delaying 2 medevacs in favor of getting 2 Ravens, right? Let's say. Anti-armor missile armor reduction reduced from 3 to 2. I think that's okay. It was pretty good. I hate to say it was pretty good. The Dorito cannon. So again, I haven't seen the how much this changes like the outcome of fights and stuff like that. But at least initially looking at it, it sounds okay. Um, this makes sense. If it's going to start with more energy, I think it's fine. And again, they're trying to balance out the fact that its cost is reduced and that the build time is reduced. And then auto turret energy cost increased from 50 to 75. It might make it, you might think it might make it harder to open Raven, because opening Raven, you kind of want to have the turrets in case you get Oland or something like that. At least in TVZ, for example. But it may not be worth it to do that anymore. And then TVT again, this changes TVT entirely because of the interaction with the Raven. You know what? Raven interaction early game TVT was starting to kill everybody, so I think that this is going to make people think of creative ways to play now, instead of like sticking to the defensive Raven stuff. And I think that's great. I really think that's fine. So, some of these changes I'm not like super happy about per se in terms of like how good or bad they are for Terran. But I do think that a lot of these changes are going to make everybody play the game a bit differently. Um, maybe except Zerg players, but but yeah, I think some of the stuff, a lot of this stuff makes sense in my opinion, considering the state of the game. Um, but I do think that Zerg got a bit of the better end of this, right? With the so we were talking about this in my Discord, and if we had to rate it, it would be like Zerg got like +1, Protoss is like at 0, and then Terran got like a -1, or Protoss got a +1. But I do think the change of the Ultra, the change of the Hydra, and the Broodlord change is very very cool. And then here we have some quality of life changes, just so your factory units don't get stuck as easily. This was actually meant to be this way, but they I think it was messed up when they implemented it. This has to do with like if your units are following another unit or command, I think, and then you know how your units will walk into disruptors or something like that, right? If it comes in range, they changed it. They made the range smaller, so your units will not walk into things as easily, pretty much. Shield battery. Yeah, using the stop command. This is actually banned in the pro tournaments, so you weren't allowed to do this in pro tournaments. ESL had banned this because it was very abusive. So people kind of stopped doing it, but yeah, they're officially killing it. Yeah, Hydra attacking faster at melee range. Fixed an issue where Mule could do cast retargeting refineries. Was the command? Could be cast targeting. Yeah. Attack target priority increase from 10 to 20. Units affected by stasis can be issued any non-build commands instead of only move commands. So this is really great because basically if you get stasis trapped, as soon as you can just shift queue them to mine as soon as the stasis trap ends, they'll mine. You couldn't do that. You can't do that now, which I think is just fucking dumb. So that's great. Fix an issue where units affected by interference matrix could not be issued stops commands. Yeah, that's fair, right? When they like just keep walking around and shit like that, I think that's great. I actually I do feel like if they change that, it might make it better. Then maybe the Raven change is not even necessary. I don't know. I'm just thinking about ideas. Fix an issue where initial creep tumors could be canceled. No longer unable to receive certain orders for 0.6 seconds after spawning. Okay, so this seems like no longer. It seems like as soon as you put it down, you could spread creep. No, never mind. I'm not. You guys, I don't know what I'm talking about. Stop. Let's not go there. Never mind. Okay. Oh, you can actually manually cancel snipes. Liberators cannot be given certain orders after immediately being ordered to unsiege. That's true. Oh, that's great. They're changing so much stuff. Like quality of life stuff. Cool. All right, guys. That concludes this video. Actually, I didn't even want it to be this long. Just for some like concluding thoughts, I do think that this patch, PTR is gonna be changed. I think that if you want it to be changed and you want some of these changes to not go through, I think the best thing we can all do is play it out. Play it out and test it and give your feedback. And that way, if anything is just like clearly not working out, it gets changed out. And like I said, you know, I do think that at least from the Terran POV, the Ghost change does suck. The Raven rework also kind of sucks a little bit. But you know, maybe it's worth it if it fixes if it removes the reliability of needing to build Ravens every game in TVT. You know, maybe we'll figure out I don't know. We'll figure out an alternative way of playing against Protoss in the early games. So you know, Raven change. Some people have been saying it's a buff. It's definitely not a buff. It's definitely a bit of a nerf, or not a bit of a nerf. It is a nerf for sure. But they just try to offset some of the nerfs by adding some other kind of like they're kind of like throwing us freebies, you know. But yeah, so that's it for this video, guys. If I missed anything or you guys want to let me know, some of the Zerg changes, I wasn't 100% sure about, right? Like the Viper one, for example. So, yeah. Otherwise, guys, thanks for watching this video, and I'll be bringing you guys some PTR balance or content, and we'll be talking about whether or not these changes are, you know, how they're working out, how they're changing the meta, and all that good jazz. So, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you guys next time.